there was a poll taken of young Americans asking them, would you vote for a socialist candidate for president? And 70% said yes.
Keeping our republic is on the line, and it requires patriots with great passion, dedication, and eternal vigilance to preserve our freedoms. Jenny Beth Martin is the co-founder of Tea Party Patriots. She is an author, a filmmaker, and one of Time magazine's most influential people in the world. But the title she is most proud of is mom to her boy-girl twins. She has been at the forefront, fighting to protect America's core principles for more than a decade. Welcome to the Jenny Beth Show.
America has seen better days. Over the last several decades, our government has spent mountains of money more than it brings in, and Congress shows no real signs of slowing down. It seems like the money printers are always on in Washington, D.C. The debate between the two major parties used to be based on generally the same foundational principles, grounded in the Constitution and rooted in capitalism. But now, one side is swiftly embracing the tenets of socialism, calling for more and more government control over our lives. At best, this is ignorant. At worst, it's just plain evil. America became the greatest and most prosperous nation in the world because of the foundational principles of individual freedom, the protection of private property, and the free market system. This framework set off a tidal wave of innovation that propelled our nation through rapid advancements in every sector of the economy that ultimately spilled over into the entire world. On Friday, June 9th, Tea Party Patriots Action is releasing a new film called Surviving Socialism that highlights the first-hand accounts of the harms that victims of socialism experience.
It is a plot to change America. We need to overthrow the capitalist system, change it radically.
By the time that I joined Antifa, I was already preconditioned to believe that America was my enemy.
The average Venezuelan has lost 24 pounds due to starvation.
People say that socialism has never been tried.
It has been tried.
That can lead us to social justice.
Being told that they can't because of the color of their skin, being told that they can't because of their gender. They're safe in marketing these ideas to children.
These were kids from kindergarten through 5th, 6th grade. Pictures of Donald Trump with swastikas.
One of the biggest economies here in California take care of illegal immigrants, but our people are sleeping on the streets.
The public square is inundated with lies and with propaganda.
My roommate that I had in college, she said, "Oh, I'm a communist." 70% would vote for socialist.
Would you choose socialism?
Yeah, I would choose it for sure.
They demonize capitalism while they're drinking their Starbucks.
The so-called Democratic Party does not have room for independent thinking black Americans like me.
Today, we truly embark on an agenda of economic, social, and racial justice in the United States of America.
We need a revolution in order to overthrow this system.
One day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their.
In this episode, I sit down with the writer of the film, Jake Tower, to discuss why we decided to make the film. For more information about the new documentary, you can visit survivingsocialismmovie.com. But before we jump into the episode, be sure to hit the like button and to subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you are watching, and be sure to share it with your friends. Jake Tower, thank you so much for being with us today. You are the writer of the new documentary that we have coming out in 2 days on June 9th, Surviving Socialism. And let's talk about that documentary. I bet there are a lot of people who are watching and listening right now who haven't heard anything about it at all.
Right. Well, Jenny Beth, you were kind enough to raise the money to make this film, and you're an executive producer on the product, as is Kevin Mooneyhan, who's also executive producing this podcast. So I was fortunate enough to be hired by our director, Luke Livingston, to write this documentary. The basic idea was just people don't know about socialism. What can we find out about it? And more importantly, there was an inciting incident that really put the impetus on making this film. And that was a couple years ago, there was a poll taken of young Americans asking them, would you vote for a socialist candidate for president? And 70% said yes. So for anyone who is Gen X or older, they heard this like a sucker punch to the ear, which is why we call our film Surviving Socialism, Don't Get Sucker Punched. Because, like I say, anyone Gen X or older, they lived through the Cold War. They had uncles, fathers, grandfathers who fought in Korea against communists, who fought in Vietnam against communists. So why would, having defeated the Soviet Union and having the Soviet Union collapse, why on earth would anyone vote for an explicitly socialist candidate for president? Hit them like a sucker punch. And what we come to find out is, how could the kids be otherwise, right? I think everyone has known for a pretty long time that political correctness in the universities has just become like a socialist indoctrination camp for them. But what we find out in our film through the reporting of Maggie Vandenberg, who just got married, and so her name now is Maggie McCarthy, great person, and she goes out on the streets of San Francisco and she films a public school of kindergartners through sixth grade, and they, in their time at school, are using taxpayer dollars to make signs saying no kids in cages. You build a wall, we tear it down. Trump is Hitler. Trump is a Cheeto president. And then the teachers on a school day take them and march the kids down the street. They block off the street, and the teachers are like, oh, yay, we're giving our kids their first protest. And it's a totally partisan, totally socialist indoctrination system of education starting in kindergarten. I think most Americans didn't know that. They're waking up to it now after the COVID lockdowns, and they are able to see what their kids are actually learning on as they look over their shoulder on the Zoom call or the platform or whatever they're learning from.
So we have the situation where the younger generations think it's okay to vote for someone who is socialist, or that a little bit of socialism won't really harm anything. And we're trying to address that and make sure they understand more about what socialism is. Part of some of the people who we highlight in the documentary are people who have survived socialism, and also younger people. Do you want to talk about some of the people who are in the documentary? Yeah, we do. We have a number of people who have been the victims of socialism or communism from around the world. I think we have a gentleman who grew up in Ukraine, which was at the time part of the Soviet Union. And one day, the NKVD, which is the precursor of the KGB, the police state of the Soviet Union, came to arrest his uncle. But his mother, who was there at the time, said, I don't know where that person is. Didn't matter to them. They shipped her off to the gulag. They shipped her off to Siberia, to this, right up at the Arctic Circle, in a gold mining town where basically political prisoners were put to work to death mining gold up in sub-zero temperatures. And literally when she was taken to the site, she was pushed out of the boxcar, given a pickaxe and a shovel, and told, build your own shelter before winter comes. 4 years later, she died. They dug a hole, buried her in the tundra at the Arctic Circle. That's just one story, and there's others. Probably the story we go into in the most detail is that of Oscar Ariesa and his wife. They're from Venezuela. He was a home builder, and he built a number of condominiums
as part of a development project. But they had a member of the chauvinistic, I guess Cesar Chavez, the name of his party is the overtly socialist, leaning towards communist party. And one of the party members came in his red shirt one day and said, you know what? Sorry, I can't afford to pay for the condominium that I ordered from you. And he said, well, you know, I waited 10 months for you to get the loan. I'm sorry, I gave you all the chances. And this guy came back a couple weeks later with, again, these like stormtroopers. They're all wearing red shirts and berets. And they just break down the doors and they hand him, they just say, this place is yours now. And then they're all cheering, yeah, we won, you know, against the bad guy capitalists or whatever. So Oscar Ariesa and his wife, they felt like, oh my God, they take all our property away. They take my business away. I'm going to have to leave the country. It feels like a gun in the head. You can't complain. You can't do anything about it. So now he comes to the United States. And he has a very vital warning for us. He says, in Venezuela, they heard from people that they knew in Cuba, like Castro when he came to power in the late 1950s, the early 1960s. He said, I'm a Democrat. I want free and fair elections. But quickly after he took power, he canceled the elections, never had them, and then implemented full-blown communism in Cuba, where it stays to this day. People are still suffering from it. And the people of Cuba warned the people of Venezuela, starts out socialism, becomes communism. Sure enough, people are starving in Venezuela. Why? Because the socialist government institutes price controls. It'll say, oh, you're a baker? Well, you can't charge any more than 10 cents for a loaf of bread. Well, what if the ingredients cost more than 10 cents? Then bakers don't make any more bread. And that's the situation they're in. That's why the people are starving. They're eating garbage out of garbage bins and they've lost like 17 pounds on average because there's not enough in the garbage bins. That's how bad it is. And so the ultimate warning from the people of Venezuela is happening in Cuba, happening in Venezuela. Don't think it can't happen right here in America.
When we were filming, it took us a while to get this filmed, and we're going to be releasing it, and we're just going straight online with it. But when we were filming, it was during 2020, which is part of why it took so long, because everything locked down. But we were the riots broke out in 2020, and so we wound up seeing a different side of socialism here in America than what we had previously seen. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was very interesting. So when we first started filming, it was as I said, the principal question was, would you democratically elect a socialist candidate for president? Presumably, if Bernie Sanders had been elected, he would have brought quite a number of socialistic policies to the forefront and probably gotten many of them passed. But what about then what we saw was it wasn't just a policy matter anymore. Starting in May of 2020, we started seeing rioting in the streets, okay, principally by Black Lives Matter and also from Antifa. And so one of the things we explore in our film is the socialist roots of both of these organizations. For example, with Black Lives Matter, we have Patrisse Cullors, one of the founders, who says right to the camera, me and the other founders, we are trained Marxists. We are very well versed in this ideology. We are trained Marxist. And so why all the corporations of America thought it was a good idea to give millions of dollars to a Marxist organization that was inciting violent riots against Target stores, storefronts, throwing firebombs into police stations in Minneapolis. I don't know, but It's like Lenin says, we don't have to worry about the capitalists. They'll be glad to sell us the rope that we'll use to hang them with. That's exactly what happened with BLM in this country. Second cause of most of the rioting was Antifa. Now, if you ask people about Antifa, they go, well, how could you be against Antifa? Antifa stands for anti-fascist. It's like, are you for fascism? Why wouldn't you also be against fascism? Everyone's against fascism.
Yes.
It's just people don't understand that Antifa wasn't just formed recently in this country. It actually started in the 1920s and 1930s in the Weimar Republic of Germany before Hitler came to power. The Nazis had the stormtroopers. Everyone's heard of them. They were street thugs who would go around breaking up the rallies of other political parties, just like we see happen all across the United States nowadays. And the Antifa was formed as the communist stormtroopers to do actual battle in the streets with the Nazi stormtroopers. Okay, so they are the socialist or communist equivalent of Nazi stormtroopers, and they remain so to this day.
Which is part of the reason why we see the violence that is coming out of them, and they're very, very aggressive and in your face. That's right. That's the history of the entire organization.
I saw a bit of film. I guess you guys were just yesterday on the south lawn of the south lawn of the Capitol, right? And you had someone disrupt your presentation there, right? Someone just feels comfortable breaking up a political presentation.
Well,
right?
What you're talking about is a press conference with, I think, 12 or 13 members of Congress and a couple of outside organizations. That particular one was about exiting the World Health Organization and asserting the sovereignty of the United States of America. And you had people who came and disrupted it. And it's not just like this is some political demonstration in the middle of a town square in Marietta, Georgia. No, it isn't that. This is members of Congress doing a press conference and answering questions from the press about bills and what they think is right for the country.
Yeah, and how different is that from marching into the halls of Congress and breaking up proceedings there, whether it's the Kavanaugh hearings or another time in Congress, right? It's wrong. It shouldn't happen. It's not allowed to happen in courtrooms. You would be in contempt of court if you did that, and you would be put in jail, and rightfully so. And people say, well, it's my free speech right. Well, no. I went to law school, so I can tell you that's what's called the heckler's veto, okay? Heckler's veto is not protected free speech under the U.S. Constitution as per numerous U.S. Supreme Court decisions. In other words, you can't the people who have the free speech rights are the congressmen who are standing up to express their opinions. If you just shout them down, if you disrupt the proceedings, that you're just being a heckler and you're vetoing their free speech rights. So that's, if you got something to say, go hold your own rally, go hold your own proceedings, go hold your own press conference.
And what you just said about the hecklers rally, which is going off just slightly away from the documentary, but I've seen several different videos online over the last over months, not just the last couple of days. Most recently, I saw one where it was a few parents who were standing up for children's rights and protecting children from surgery related to transgender type issues, and they have a podium. They clearly have they have organized an event to be at this particular public square or sidewalk area, and police are not making the move. So from what I can see from this particular video, they had the right to be there, and they weren't violating any rules or laws by being there. And then you had people who were coming up and screaming at them and interrupting. And then one person, they're standing at the podium, the lady is at the podium, and another person just comes and just starts yelling and screaming nonstop and did exactly what you were saying. And I was wondering, as I watched that particular one, how would I deal with that? Because our organization has been known to do a few demonstrations and protests. How would I handle that particular situation? So it's useful information to know.
Yeah, it's the opposite of what we think of as representative democracy, right? Where we elect congressmen to go and deliberate on issues and to make pronouncements and speeches on their proposed policies, all right? And then the very word parliament, which is the form of democracy they have in England and many other countries, it comes from the French, which means from the French parler, to speak. It essentially means government by speaking, okay? Government by discussion, not government by threatened violence in the street, by screaming in someone's face and by your very physical presence assaulting them. That's not the kind of government we want to have. But that's part and parcel of the long socialist tradition of government.
Going back to the documentary, we also feature in the documentary 2 young people, which should give people hope that you mentioned the poll where 70% of young people would vote for a socialist. There are people who will not, who are younger, including Morgan Zegers and Scott Pressler. Do you want to talk about anything about them?
Yes, every film, to be a good film, needs its villains. We've talked about those, but it also needs its heroes, right? If at the end of your movie it's just like, oh, woe is us, we're doomed, we'll never make it, yeah, then you're like Eeyore, then you just can't move ahead. I mean, people are paralyzed with learned helplessness. And so we have our heroes in the film, and they are Candace Owens, and we show how she started her own movement, which was Blexit, which was basically talking to African Americans and saying, hey, what's the Democrat Party done for you lately? Maybe you should try something else. Maybe you're not the victim that you're being told you are in school. Maybe through education, through hard work, through staying out of jail, making sure you get married before you have kids. Hey, maybe you could have a good life too in America. That's the American dream. Why don't you pursue it rather than wasting all your time just complaining that it's not handed to you? So she gives us hope. She gives us inspiration. We also have Morgan Zegers, who founded her own organization called Young Americans Against Socialism, YAS. So anyway, YAS, basically, she talks at length in the film about she realized there was a problem when she went to college on the first day. And she came into her roommates and her dorm room, and the roommate had already decorated the room, and there was a poster on the wall, and it said, "Welcome to the party." And then it showed the following people: Lenin, Stalin, Mao, and Castro, and they're all wearing little party hats, and they have little tropical beverages that they're drinking. And I think Mao is on the turntable, spinning some records or something like this. And so it says, "Welcome to the party," and there's all these communist dictators. And so Morgan Zegers asked her roommate, "What's up with that?" And she goes, "Oh, didn't I tell you? I'm a communist." And Morgan Zegers like, "Oh, okay. Oh, how wonderful is that? I'm rooming with a communist. That this could be acceptable in America. It shouldn't be any more acceptable than a roommate who says, "Oh, I'm a Nazi. Didn't I tell you?" Like, "Oh yeah, you don't like the Hitler poster I have up? Hitler's just as bad as all these other dictators who killed their own people by the millions." So anyway, she's also in the film. We also have Scott Pressler. He would tell you right now, if he were here, I'm sure, it's like, stop talking, take action. And here's what I like about Scott Pressler is he seems to have found a way forward to recruit more people to become Republicans and register them to vote. And he doesn't just do it by going door to door, knocking on people's screens and asking them to register. He started a couple years ago when, you remember when in Baltimore they had that horrible rat problem?
Yes.
And Scott Pressler said, you know, I'm tired of just hearing everyone fight and scream about this. He put on Twitter, I'm going to Baltimore this weekend. I'll be there Saturday on this corner, and I'm going to clean up trash. Anyone want to join me? And between 100 and 200 people showed up, and they carried out 10 tons of trash. And they got it all done, and they didn't receive any government subsidies. In fact, the Democratic administration of Baltimore, they said, oh, you don't have a permit, you can't do this. But the police officers came up and said, hey, do you have a permit to do this? And they go, no. And he goes, the police officers told him, it's like, you know what, we're glad you're doing this. Just please go ahead. So then finally the permit was denied the weekend after they had actually done the cleanup already. But his attitude is not come in, what can you do for me? Could you register for my party? His is, hey, we care about you. We're here to clean up your neighborhood. We're here to give you hope that you can take care of your own neighborhoods too, that you can be self-sufficient. You don't have to wait for the government broom pushers to come and clean this trash up. And then seeing that he cares about them enough to help, that they then gladly sign up and register to be Republicans. So it's all very, very inspiring.
It is, and I think that I encourage everyone who's listening and watching this to go watch the documentary. There's no cost to it. I think that we're putting it behind an email wall, so we're asking people to give their email addresses so that we know who's watching it, and we can follow up with action items like from Scott and from Morgan and from Candace and Tea Party Patriots, Tea Party Patriots Action. So we want it to be a tool that you can use to educate people and then be inspired to take action, because we have a country to save. We can't let our country turn into a socialist country.
I totally agree, and hopefully you'll be able to show it to your friends, family, various groups you might be members of. If you're a member of Tea Party Patriots and you have a chapter or something, by making the film free online, you'll be able to hook it up to a TV monitor with your computer and show it to your group. It's only an hour long, but we really pack in so much information, and I just feel like the whole country's been turned upside down in the last couple of years, and people feel so bewildered by it. They don't know what to make of it. This film really kind of puts it all in perspective. It's not an accident. It's part of the long march through the institutions and now through the streets of socialism. And it's taken us all by surprise, and that, again, is why we call it Surviving Socialism. Don't get sucker punched.
Absolutely. So we will encourage people to go watch the documentary. You can find it at teapartypatriots.org. And Jake Tower, the writer of Surviving Socialism, thank you so much for being with us today.
Jenny Beth, thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure today. Can't wait for the film to come out and everyone to see it. Thank you so much for putting it all together, making it happen.
Oh, my pleasure.
You're a real patriot. God bless you for all the work you do, Jenny Beth.
Thank you, and I really hope people go watch it and enjoy it, get a lot out of it, and share it with others. Thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you.
The Jenny Beth Show is hosted by Jenny Beth Martin, produced by Kevin Mooneyhan, and directed by Luke Livingston. The Jenny Beth Show is a production of Tea Party Patriots Action. For more information, visit teapartypatriots.org.
If you enjoyed this episode and want to stop freedom thieves from turning our country into a communist nightmare, be sure to click the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And while you're at it, click the notifications bell to get an alert every time we post a new episode.